Hey toy fans, Aaron here. Today taking a look at the Jabba Skiff Guard 3-pack as it's commonly known by, but on the packaging itself all you're going to see is that it's a special 3 action figures. All of this is done in the vintage collection packaging, and what that means is for the outer box you're just getting a plain black box, nothing really special to look at. Through the windowed packaging though, you do get a look at the carded figures, just the figures. You're not going to obviously see the card themselves until you open it up. And then off to the right of that, you get the names of each included figure. You'll note that Brock Starsher is still listed as Jabba's Skiff Guard on the outer packaging, but when we get to the card itself, you'll see that they did indeed use his proper name. Side of the packaging just has that Return of the Jedi logo along with figures in multiple languages, with one being off on the left side and 2 different languages on the right side. Up on the top, aside from the 3 skiff guards that you're getting here, you also see your latest wave of vintage collection figures that are being offered. And then on the back side, you have a nice large image of the battle over the Sarlacc with a pretty lengthy description about what's going on in this scene. You can hit pause and hopefully you can zoom in or something and kind of read that a little bit better. Carrying on though, looking at the cards for each of the figures that are included. First up we got Vedain. Hopefully I'm saying that right. He's the pilot of the skiff that was carrying Luke, Han, and Chewie and such. Beautiful photo on the card. The blue of the sky really pops out, and then of course through the blister you get a look at the included figure. On the back side, nothing different here. Top right corner, he is number 152 in the line. And then contained in the upper half, you got an image of the 6 figures that are available in the line at this time. Again, 3 of those being the Skiff Guard pack, with the other 3 being the recently released retail wave of vintage collection. Next up, we got Vizam. This is a reissued figure, but he is making his debut on the vintage collection packaging. And as you can see, the photo of him shows him in action holding that rail cannon on the sail barge. Backside card is identical to what we just saw for Vedain, but Vizam is number 153 in the line. And then we move on to Brock Starsher, who is also a reissued figure. He was available first in the Black Series line, but he was released under the name of Jabba Skiff Guard. Great image in the background of the card of this character. And then on the back side, everything on that card is identical to the other 2, but you can see he's number 154 in the line. And now looking at the figures out of the packaging, I'll start first with Vedain. This is a new character to the line, but he is reusing some parts from other figures. First, the head and hands are taken from the Nitko figure, which makes sense, it's the same alien, so why not use the same parts? And the legs are taken from the vintage collection release of Weequay. Otherwise though, that main body is new, and overall I think this is a great looking figure. I think we've been given a great representation of how the character looked on screen. Going in for a closer look at the head, he does have a removable helmet or head wrap. I guess you'd still call it a helmet, why not? Great detailing to the sculpting here, multiple colors being painted in, and for the most part all the different colors of the paint are staying pretty much where they belong. Just an ever so slight amount of that light green bleeding up onto the gray. It's getting pretty nitpicky there. Beautiful silver emblem detailing up on the top of that helmet. And then as I mentioned, it is removable, so you can slide that off and we can take a closer look at the rest of that head sculpt. I should note that when you have that helmet on, it stays in place very well. I've had no problems with it falling off or anything. But as for the head sculpt, things really are looking good. I think they got all the little creases and crevices of the skin detailing done very nicely. Overall, a nice dark brown paint job, little mixes of lighter brown in there. Some nice black painting on the little horns that are sticking out around the eyes. And then paint job for the eyes are looking pretty nice. Little bits of orange in there and some black dots for the pupils. For the upper body of the figure, things are mostly looking really good here. Great dirt wash to the entire shirt. Maybe a little bit overdone. Does feel like a little bit of a disconnect with the over dirty arms and the cleaner look of the chest. I think for me it still works. It still looks good. It highlights all the wrinkles and folds that are in there on the shirt. What I'm having a hard time liking though is the fact that the hinges for the figure are just clean. You see a little bit of that white hinge sticking through on the front of the arms, but on the back side, I wish they would have just carried it through. It looks like they painted him with his arms being closed or something. So when you have his arms at a slight bend or even bent more, it's just a very clean spot and it sticks out like a sore thumb. That leather wrap that lays over his shoulders has some pretty nice detailing in there, making it, that leather detail that you expect to see. A little grain and texturing in there. Nice silver painting for those snaps that are holding everything together along the back. And a nice green backpack sculpted on there. It is glued into place. That's not removable. But sculpting and detailing to that is looking pretty good. And then as we get to the hands of the figure, they did paint in some dark gray like his shirt has some elastic or something on the cuff. Judging by the photo on the card, that shouldn't look that way, but whatever. I mean, it doesn't take away from the figure at all. Some more dark gray or black bits painted on his hand to highlight the little horn detailing, but otherwise skin tone matches up very well with the head. Around his waist, you got a nice utility belt sculpted on there. And that little skirt flap is very soft, so when I go through the articulation, you're going to see that it doesn't hinder any of the leg movement. Got a holster sculpted off to the right side of the hip. There again, you got some nice leather detailing being sculpted in there. And then otherwise, you got some pouches sculpted on the front. And then getting through the legs, things are looking like pant legs here. You got a fair amount of dirt wash to it that really highlights the wrinkles and folds here also. And then getting down to the boots of the character, things here also looking pretty good. With a nice matte gray, maybe a little bit of green mixed in there even as I'm looking at it a little closer. But painting's still looking good. As for the articulation, that head's going to swivel all the way around. Little bit of nodding side to side, and an ever so slight amount of movement up and down. Shoulders lift up pretty much straight out, and they do swivel around. At the elbow, you got a pretty good 90-degree bend with your swiveling in there, and then each of the hands only swivel at the wrist. As for the waist articulation, he does spin all the way around. A little bit of movement side to side, and even a decent amount of crunching forward and back. He does bend down to bring the legs straight out in front of him, and bends equally as far backwards. Single hinge bend at the knee, and you got your swiveling in there. And at the ankles, you got a good range forward and back, along with your swiveling at that joint. As for accessories, not counting that helmet, which to me is part of the figure, does come with a single blaster. You'll see that this sculpt is used for each of the other two figures that are included in this set. It does appear to be molded in just the gray plastic. Decent sculpting to it, but as you can see, no special weathering or anything else being applied. And of course, if you don't want him to hold it, you can slide that blaster in the holster for safekeeping. And moving on now to Vizam, which is a repaint of that 2013 Black Series release. Here you can see both of those side by side, and there's really only a couple noticeable differences between the two figures. Be the painting in the face, a little bit of a lighter brown color here on the newer release, and also on the top of the shoulders, he's getting more of an orange color paint job, whereas the previous release was just basically an off-white. Aside from that, the blues, just a little bit of a shade difference, really not that noticeable. And also overall on this new release, you're getting a bit less of dirt wash being applied to that brown skirt around the waist, or leather piece. I know it's not a skirt, but whatever you want to call it. And then for the legs here also, not as shiny, and a bit less of dirt wash being applied here. Overall, though, sculpting to this figure does look great. I didn't do a review yet on that Black Series figure, so I'll carry on with this. The same as we had for the Skiff Pilot figure, the head and hands are also being used from that Nitco Skiff Guard release. And as I mentioned, I am fine with that. Same alien, so why not? But overall in that head and hands, you're getting a different color brown paint job. So it certainly helps make the figure look unique. Detailing to his helmet is looking pretty good. Nice gray painting on the top with that brown carrying on for the bottom. This helmet is removable, but I will say it doesn't stay on as well as it did for the Pilot figure. You start to move this guy around and tilt him to the sides, this thing is going to just fall right off. So I found that a bit annoying to deal with as I've been shooting the video for this. Otherwise though, face sculpting's looking great. Still got that black painting on the tips of the horns running around the eyes. And still a little bit of a wash overall around the head to help bring out some of the crevices and wrinkles of that sculpt. Upper body of the figure really does look great. Essentially looks like he jumped right off the screen. Nice ribbing detail being done for the midsection of the chest, and a nice blue color popping out for the sleeves of his shirt. Pretty decent detailing for the wrist gauntlets running around his, wrist. Back of the figure, a little bit of a dirt wash being applied here. It's nice and subtle, I like the way they did that, and then you can see that yellow strap running around from that chest padding. Around his waist, pretty good belt detailing. There's some pouches sculpted in there, a little bit of a copper belt buckle being painted in. And off on the left side of his hip, you do have a functioning holster you can slide his blaster into. As for the legs, here also, nice quilted detailing being done for the fabric, and a relatively subtle dirt wash being applied. It helps highlight some of those wrinkles, and it certainly makes the figure look like it's been living in the world for a long time. What I wish they would have corrected from that original release, though, are the bright blue hinges that are shown on the back of the legs. Just sticks out like a sore thumb. Sculpting for the boots are looking really good. Nice black paint job being applied here. And then as far as articulation, of course, that head's going to spin all the way around. A little bit of nodding side to side and some movement up and down. Even with that extra armor on the shoulders, you still get a good straight bend up. And they do rotate all the way around. At the elbows, you're able to achieve a 90-degree bend. And you also get your swiveling at that joint. And then for each of the hands, they swivel all the way around. At the waist, you only get a full swivel here. Your leg movement is a bit hindered from that skirt piece. The legs don't bend quite straight out, and you get the same range going backwards. Single joint bend at the knee, also you're swiveling in there. And at the feet, they are hinged, but because of the way that top part of the boot is sculpted, I'm just not getting any movement forward and back, but you still get your swivel in there. As for accessories, it comes with a single blaster. As I already mentioned, this is sculpted the same way that you just saw for the pilot figure, except now for whatever reason, it is being done in that silver color, just the same as he was on the original release. Still, detailing's looking pretty good. You can slide the weapon in either hand. And as I mentioned earlier, the figure does have the functioning holster, so if you want, you can slide the blaster in there. And he does come with a second accessory that you might have noticed from the packaging, and that's going to be the rail cannon from the sail barge. Pretty nice size to it. Some good detailing in there. Overall, as you can see, it's done in the silver painting, but no other weathering or special paint application has been done. When comparing it with the rail cannon that we received from the original release, I gotta say, I like that old one so much better. Just a much better paint job to it. Makes it look very just gritty and dirty. It does have a bit of articulation with a ball joint at the end of the gun. Unfortunately, or at least on mine, I'm not getting any use out of that. I think that silver paint is kind of stuck together inside the ball joint, so it just kind of flops right back into its original position. Maybe I'll eventually get that loosened up. As you can see, you can get the figure to hold it in his hand, make him look like he's kind of carrying it around. But aside from it fitting on the sail barge, if by chance you don't have that and you have the skiff, you can certainly slide that on to the rear or front railing. I know it's not movie accurate, but at least you could get some playability from it. And now moving on to Brock Starsher, and as I mentioned, he is a re-release of the 2014 Black Series figure. I already did a full review of that release. I'll put a link in the description below, so if you want to check that out. Otherwise, though, I'll stick to just comparing these two figures. And while there's not much of a difference between the two, what noticeable difference there is, I think really makes this new release just stand out that much more. And that is at the neck of the figure. You're getting the peach color painted in there for the skin tone of the character, which was not done for that initial release. And just that little difference makes this new release stand out that much more, I feel like. Aside from that, the only differences between the figures is just an ever so slight color variation. The black for the helmet is a much deeper black on this new one, a little bit more gloss to it, and just an ever so slight shade difference between the whites and the copper colors on his chest and running down the sides of the legs. And the weapons sculpted the same. They do seem to lean a bit more on the purple side than on the brown side, but I think you're only going to notice that if you're holding them up next to each other. So overall for me, this is an awesome set of figures to receive, even though two of them are re-releases. I'm glad that we got a new figure at least out of the whole bunch, but I think with the release of the Skiff, with the sail barge earlier in the year, the fact that one of these comes with the rail cannon that you can use on your sail barge, I think this is a good set to definitely get back out in the world. I really hope that with all this love right now for this particular scene in Return of the Jedi, I hope we get more packs coming out. Certainly a lot of people are going to want to populate the Skiff, want to populate the sail barge with Jabba's crew. And even though you may already have two of these figures, it's certainly worth picking up just to get them at least on the vintage collection card backs. So that wraps up this review. Definitely let me know what your thoughts are on this set in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.